Hello, and welcome to this conversation. I'm Forrest, Bryant, a member of the team at the best way to present and record yourself on video. This video is being produced in right now. You can learn more by visiting us at app. That's app. Today we'll be talking about why storytelling matters, and it is my great pleasure to be joined on screen by the one and only Jay Acunzo. I can't think of a better guest to talk about this topic. Jay Acunzo helps business leaders become stronger speakers and storytellers. He's worked in marketing roles for companies like Google and HubSpot, but then Jay became a professional keynote speaker, speaking to everyone from an audience of 4,000 marketers to 500 dentists to 40 CEOs. He's hosted docuseries for startups, podcasts for global brands. He's consulted companies like MailChimp and Wistia and Salesforce on how to tell stronger stories. But today, Jay earns a living coaching clients on public speaking and messaging. And you can also hear him every week as the host of the popular and fabulous podcast, How Stories Happen, where voices like Seth Godin and Rand Fishkin and Ann Handley break down the stories they love to tell piece by piece. Now, that is a bucket list right there. Hello, Jay. How did you get so dang lucky?
Forrest, I don't know. I was born into a wonderful family that showed me the power of writing and creativity and storytelling and then supported me. So like when I was born, the door was ajar for me. I want to make no bones about that. It was, I'm from a very privileged background and continue to try and dip into that privilege for the greater good. But, you know, I've worked hard, but let's not joke around here. Like I've had a lot of luck in my career. You're right. So thank you for that really glowing introduction. And it's awesome to see you after several years. I haven't seen you in a little while. It's good to see you.
It has. People wouldn't know this, but we've actually spoken before in a different world, a different broadcast series, different companies. But yeah, it's great to reconnect with you after all these years. And I would love to know about like the overarching arc of your career. Like what sparked this passion for storytelling and how did it lead to this career that you have now?
I think it was honestly at a young age. I mean, so much of creativity is practice. So much of this stuff is just putting in the reps and improving and making adjustments and continuing and persisting. Building a body of work matters so much. When I was young, somebody said, "Hey, that thing you wrote, that was pretty good." And I think I just liked being complimented. And so I just continued doing that, right? I think that does really matter. And at a young age, I would film things for my family's ping pong tournaments, ESPN3, brought to you by me and my three cousins. And then ESPN3 temporarily became a thing for ESPN. So we're very prescient. I would write stories about my, childhood stuffed animals and rubber snake toys and things like that. I was always making things and I was always like, is that a camera? I'll be in front of it. And in school, I wanted to be a sports journalist. And it was there I saw this overlap between a body of knowledge and a cast of characters and broader human themes. Because my favorite storytelling is certainly of the, Bourdainian, or if you're a comedy fan, Burbiglian ilk, where it sort of nudges up against that line of sentimentality without going too far over it, or romanticism without going too far over it. It's just that I apply it in the business world about workplace topics for myself and my clients. So I'm trying to bring that tradition, trying to bring that body of knowledge into this world that I think sorely needs it.
Yeah, and let's be clear about this. When we talk about storytelling in a business context, some people may not quite be able to connect that. What are we talking about exactly, right? We're not talking about making things up, and we're not talking about dumbing them down.
Nope. I always go back to one quote. It's from Kazuo Ishiguro, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017. And in the acceptance speech, he said, "Stories are like one person saying to another, 'This is how it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it also feel this way to you?'" So therein lies the rub for us in the marketing world, the business world, a leadership sense, a sales sense, whatever. It's not just about clarity. Can you understand what I'm saying? It's also about connection. Does it also feel this way to you? So I could tell you a good story about what I did over the weekend, and you might be delighted by that, but you're not likely to change how you think or change how you act. And in the business world, we have to spark action. We earn trust, we spark action. Those are the two jobs of a communicator or a leader. And so you also need that emotional resonance. And that to me is the one word that I seek to explore and teach others the most. I seek to be known for that word. And it is my premise that you should probably and pretty consistently prioritize resonance over reach to grow a business or a cause. So that's what we're talking about. Can you communicate in a way that ensures others care, but more to the point of our results, take an action? internally in their own minds or externally in their work or their lives. That's an effective storyteller, is I communicate in ways that move you.
Yeah. I did want to bring that concept of resonance mattering more than reach, because reach is so often like the number one
Yeah.
metric we're looking at, right?
Yep.
How many people
Totally.
did you how many people saw the thing? But just because somebody sees it doesn't mean they're responding to it. So
Yes.
yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. What happens when a professional focuses on resonance in communicating their ideas?
Let's define the two terms. Reach is how many see it, resonance is
Mhm.
how much they care. And so a
Yeah.
lot of my kindred spirits out there publishing things in the world, we are on these channels that push us on the idea of reach, or else the culture around us in an industry niche or at a company really prioritizes reach. How many saw it? And I am much more interested in how deeply they care about it, because I know if someone cares, they'll take an action, whether that's subscribe, watch, listen, buy, refer, anything. Or again, even internally in their head and their heart, they align with you more deeply, which makes everything else you want easier. And so for me, resonance being how much they care, I define it as the urge to act that people feel when a message or a moment aligns so closely with them, they feel amplified. And if you look
Mm,
in the sciences, that's what you find. You find this idea of resonance there, not just in the creative arts or the world of business, where two frequencies align, they're considered resonant frequencies. And if you apply the first to the second is amplified. So in the sciences, it's literally an energy transfer. And we've all been on the receiving end of the spoken or written word or some kind of experience with a person or an organization where we feel that undeniable energy. And then we just go, wow, that'd be nice if we could trigger that. And that made no sense to me. It's like, we should figure out what that is and also like try to do it more consistently everywhere we go. And so for me, if you want results or you're trying to get creative fulfillment or both, yes, you ought to prioritize resonance. Can you impart the urge to act with other people on the receiving end of a message or a moment with you? If you don't, no results happen. And I would argue you also don't feel the thing that, I know you and I love, Forrest, which is just feeling fulfilled, feeling enriched by the created act.
yeah, and it's important to recognize that we are talking about resonance, not understanding. That's a different thing. You need both. But
Yeah,
resonance, we're
certainly.
talking about this interaction between two people, not just I
Right.
understand what you're saying, but I
Totally.
connect to this. Yeah.
Yes. And now you can bring back the idea of storytelling too, which is like, okay, a story is a vehicle pivoting around a premise, an assertion, a change that meets somebody where they're at first and then hits all the beats they need to hear, not just to feel gripped, but to feel moved forward in the action and then forward beyond the story. And as like a professional speaker, you learn this when you give keynotes. Like a keynote
Mhm.
is to the whole room. You're not quite as sure as when you're giving a breakout who they are or what they care about or why they selected you, because they didn't. You're opening the whole event or closing it. And so you have to meet them where they're at and make a logical case for your ideas. And that can feel excruciating. I think we're so close to the end results that we want, or we're so close to the conclusions and ideas that we make and that we share, that what we've stopped doing is learning how to align with people, agitate the problem and pain, and introduce some tension, make some kind of assertion that now they're ready to hear because they feel like they're taken care of, like we're aligning with them, and then invite them to the advice, the stories, the methodology, the offers that we sell, the projects that we have. We're always at the end of that. And I think there's a way to re engineer how we communicate, which does resemble that of a speaker or a storyteller.
Yeah, and I want to get into like the elements that make this work, but first I want to break down one more possible barrier here. You mentioned, professional speakers, and some people may see storytelling as an exclusive domain. Marketers or ad agencies or people who, go up and speak in front of audiences for a living.
Yeah.
Why do you believe storytelling is a critical skill for all professionals, like regardless of industry or role?
Yeah, it's the operating system for human understanding, and it has been since we were able to communicate. I mean, this is not something you don't do already. If you're talking to your kid, if you're talking to your peers, your friends, like when the stakes go away and you just communicate, you swap stories. I mean, have you ever been eager to speak while someone else is speaking? What are you thinking of sharing? Oh, that's like in my vacation when me and my
Mm,
family did. You share a story and it's effortless. And then all of
yeah.
a sudden we put on a business hat or any kind of stakes start to creep in and we're like, well, I can't. And I think that's because of this one main problem, which is that we are taught that a story must be this giant newsworthy thing, And so what we look for or try to manufacture are those newsworthy giants. I started a billion-dollar company. I was at death's door, whatever.
Mhm.
You're not likely to have many newsworthy stories, if any, at your disposal, but you have a ton of noteworthy things. Like what a really good storyteller does is they don't experience anything extraordinary. They know how to find meaning all around them in the ordinary. They're just like meaning
Mm.
makers and synthesizers, or they're noticers. I mean, that's the hallmark of any good creative, any good
Sure.
scientist, even. Like, we're noticers. It's a rich way to live. It's also a much better way to fuel your content and your communications. So yeah, I'm going to teach you whatever 6 tips to become a stronger speaker for your next engagement. But maybe I should open with some kind of tiny little anecdote from my childhood and use it as a metaphor. Or maybe I have some kind of story I can tell you that shows you what I mean instead of tells you. And so we're
Mhm.
surrounded by all these things. And I like to joke that in the era of AI, turns out people also run on LLMs. Like if AIs have large language models, people have little life moments.
Mhm.
And we do not use those, yet no one else has access to them. And that's also the most powerful way to connect with someone else. Because while you're describing yours, they're grafting on theirs. And now all of a sudden they're enrolled in your ideas and your experience. So back to the Ishiguro quote, does it also feel this way to you? Let me tell you a tiny
Mhm.
little story. And that's where you say to me, yes, it does feel this way to me. So yes, I push back hard against this idea that storytelling is for performers or for agencies or for the news. It's not. It's for all of us.
And you mentioned that it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can just be about noticing, and noticing is
Yeah.
such a critical business skill, right? Being able to spot patterns, to have insights, to
Right.
notice what's going on and be able to craft, you know, a story, or if you're not thinking in those terms, be able to just craft an understanding of what it is that you're seeing in the data or in the business, or, in the trends, and being able
Yes.
to talk about that in a coherent way.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to, sort of say, oh, just do this. Because let's acknowledge there's a
Yeah,
lot of head trash. There's a lot of preconceived
sure,
notions. There's a lot
sure.
of, I mentioned at the top of our interview here, like I come from a world of being privileged, white, straight, cisgendered male. Like the door was ajar for me. And I can't sit here and
Mhm.
say, just do this. But
Sure.
I do think we can take heart in the fact that this is a practice. Like if you want to get better at it, write every day, write once a week, ship it to
Mm.
nobody and make hitting publish the goal, not any kind of other result. Like a lot of folks who want to speak, they don't either try to give free talks or book their own and organize a meetup in their town, or create a project tangential to public speaking, like podcasting or videos or something like that.
Mm.
It's like all around us, we have our own unfair advantages to not just dip into our lives and our experiences for storytelling fodder, but also execute that in a way that generations ago you'd have to go through a gatekeeper. And so if you're looking like, I want to speak like Forrest does or Jay does or a hero of mine, that is a practice. Like they're sitting on top, you're putting them on a pedestal, but I assure you the pedestal is mostly made of crap. It's mostly made of bad work and attempts to do things that nobody saw. And it feels messy to them too, as it does for you. It's just that they persisted through the mess. So I don't want to say, oh, just stop doing this and just start doing that. It's a lot of work, but a lot of that work is something that's attainable to more of us than ever before.
And it is putting in that work that is, I think, one of the
Totally.
key ways to get over that sort of creative block or that intimidation
Yes.
about the idea of being creative. Who was it who said, seat of the pants in the seat of the chair, or you just have to sit down and do it. Or there's this
Yes.
great quote. I think it's might have been William Faulkner who says, I only write when the muse hits me, and the muse comes promptly at 9 a.m. every morning.
I love that. Oh, I love that. And like the entire premise of my podcast, How Stories Happen, we're not trying to do a long form interview about someone's genius and bio. We're trying to have them dissect one story piece
Hmm.
by piece, because you learn a lot more about the craft that you can then master versus their backstory. Whoever it is, Seth Godin, Ann Handley, some of these folks that we feel are fancy and accomplished, and they are. Their genius, I think, is better unlocked in the minutia. But one of the inspirations for me doing a show like How Stories Happen is this quote by Ira Glass, who
Hmm.
says that great stories happen to those who can tell them. And
Hmm.
what he doesn't mean is noteworthy and newsworthy things only are experienced by people who coincidentally are also exceptional storytellers. No, he means you don't experience stories, you experience your life, and then you put your butt in the chair and you craft that material into stories. And I learned that as an author and a speaker and a very public facing type of marketer for certain roles that I've had in the past. And what I'm trying to do is sort of translate, distill, give language and methodology to those abilities and hand it out to the people who are experts and practitioners and have substance and are service minded, so that they can stand out easier and resonate deeper, because it's a skill, it's a craft, which means it can be learned and practiced. It is not a gift, nor is it all empty hype, which I think we're also tipping towards.
Mm.
Because
Hmm.
people with substance are like, how do I stand out? I don't know. I need an overly sensationalized social media hook. And or you can lean harder into this craft and really truly bring out your best ideas, your strongest ideas, your highest impact ideas, and compete on that instead of the volume game.
I want to circle back to this, but first I want to talk more about like what is you're trying to convey, and where. So like let's talk about where storytelling matters.
Sure.
It seems like the most common setting where an everyday professional might need to rely on storytelling would be in just
Yeah.
delivering a presentation, right? Maybe to your team, maybe to clients, maybe in a more public setting. Is that correct,
Right.
or is that too narrow a view?
I think people do. There's storytelling with a capital S and storytelling with a lowercase s.
Uh,
Storytelling with a lowercase s is like, let me show you what I'm saying here on stage in the speech, Forrest, or audience. Meet Michelle. And Michelle is a business strategist who, that's a story
Mhm.
with a small s. It's a narrative, right? There's a character,
Right.
there's forward action. And as an author and speaker, you have a selection of signature stories in your bag. Or as a newsletter writer, you tell stories in service of an insight you're imparting, right? That's
Mhm.
great. And we need more practice at that. And we need our signature stories that we know we can tell and customize everywhere we go. Yes. But then there's this like capital S version, which is, okay, how do you see it? What's your premise for everything? Mine being resonance over reach. Do you have a big idea that you use as a lens through which you see everything? Because then I can tell you like the story of me or the story of my ideas or
Mm.
the answer to that question colored by that lens. And what I'm doing is I'm merely going through the beats of, I got to align with you. I got to introduce and agitate some tension, acknowledge the
Yeah.
problems. Then I got to have some kind of assertion that I'm making. Well, I think the
Mhm.
resolution is we go that way. Others think this way in my space. No, I see it differently. And then how do I do it? Here's some teachings. And so using more tension, even just saying like, Forrest, that's such a great question. And I think in general, we mostly approach storytelling like lowercase s stories, but
Yeah.
actually there's this other version where we're communicating that pivot right there with tension. Here's what we normally do. Do you feel aligned? But
Mhm.
actually, here's some tension. And then here's how I see it. There's a capital S version of storytelling that we can try. Even communicating like that is learned and does lean you in a little bit more because I'm communicating with what I would call generous tension. It's not clickbait. It's me saying there's a question that I'm inserting here, and then we will go on together to answer it, even if it's pivoting in the moment between a simple word like the word but. So to answer your question directly, everywhere you show up, you can communicate like a storyteller, but you have to do the work to figure out what are my stories and then what's
Mhm.
my sort of capital S story, the lens, the premise through which I see everything.
And you talked about signature stories. That was a phrase you used a moment ago.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I have a bag of stories that I can tell about founders and executives and soloists and peers and my past self and my family. And by the way, those are all people. You can't tell a story about a logo because logos don't stand up, move around, make mistakes, and learn things. So if you tell a story, it's about a person or a group of people. But I have all these stories that it starts just me writing it out in my newsletter, and before that in a notebook too. And then I bring it on a podcast, like, a show I was on yesterday asked me a question about storytelling. And I was like, let me illustrate instead of just tell you. Here's a quick story from my life. I have these stories like a comedian that have been built and refined and put it in front of people and it didn't work and I re-engineer it and now they can go in the speech and the webinar and the newsletter and all these things. Like a signature story is a story that lives in your bones, not your
Mm.
brain. You know what I mean? Like I can
Mhm.
bring it out everywhere, flex it to any container and arrive at any point I want to arrive to. And I can sign my name to it. That's the signature part. It's not that I tell it a lot because you got to be careful. You can't just like shut off your brain and regurgitate points you've made a million times.
Right.
I need to be present. and I learned this as a speaker, you got to be present in the room. You got to react, you got to move, you got to customize. But I can sign my name to this. Like, I know the shape of
Mm.
it. I know the beats of the action, and I can use it in service of this moment or this audience or this point today as different from yesterday or tomorrow. So it's not that you have to act like a storyteller who's a professional entertainer or an author in the business world, but it does help to have those go-to what starts as anecdotes and examples, and kind of over time you turn them into a list of signature stories that are your old reliables.
Yeah. When you said you can't tell a story about a logo, my first thought was, well, I know some designers who might dispute that. But no, I think actually that story is not about the logo. It's the signature story of the company.
It's well, here's the thing. You can tell a story of, I don't know, there's a community, a group listed on my mug here. There's a community that I know full of independent consultants called The Upside. So here's on my mug, it says The Upside. And I've spoken to that group before, and that's why I have this mug. So I can't tell you a story about The Upside. I can tell you a story about Aaron, who founded it, or a person I met through it. But people start their storytelling by talking about the organization, and that's fine. What I'm here to say is what you're not doing is connecting deeper,
Yeah.
because you're not bringing out the person of it. Because what's receiving your story is not a logo. What's
Mm.
receiving your story is a person. And they're trying to personalize everything you're saying to judge it, to go, do I agree with you or not? Do I object to this or not? Do I go forward with you and use your ideas and continue on the journey with you, whether that's read, watch, listen, buy, subscribe, anything, or not? And so you're giving me another reason to go, well, I'm not a tiny little community. I'm a large corporation. Or I'm not a CPG brand. I'm a this brand. Like, we object less when a person was involved, especially if that person is not a celebrity, because they're kind of
Mhm.
like a logo themselves. I love the stories that have this like patina of dirt on them, that like ugly truth of reality that we all face,
Mm.
where it's not, here's this brand that started, it's Airbnb, and they wanted to start Airbnb, and then they encountered this one problem, and then they got over the problem, and everything has been great since, and now they're Airbnb. Because all
Mm.
I'm doing is allowing you to erect more objections or insert more head trash. A story about a person helps you sweep away the head trash so that my
Mm.
teachings can come in behind it. So that's where I would disagree. If the designer is telling a story about a logo, it should be about the construction of the logo as done by whom? A designer, a person.
Yes, humans. And we're also
Yeah.
talking now, I think we're getting into things like authenticity, but also I'm wondering about like curation. So I think one thing that maybe prevents people from embracing a storytelling model is that they're afraid they're going to bore people. They're afraid they're going to be irrelevant. They're afraid they're going to be
Yeah.
seen as just self-centered. Uh,
Yeah.
are there things that you want to exclude as in addition to thinking about what you want to include? Are there things that yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because storytelling is ultimately an exercise in restraint. It's not
Mm.
just what you include, it's what you don't include.
Mhm.
I was talking to a client the other day, and she had a big keynote coming up, and she was talking about this pizza maker was kind of like one of her signature stories for her speech. And her speech is about how, as creatives, the more we work, the longer we do this, the more opportunity or promotions we get, the further from the work we get, right? Because we lead teams or we start companies. And she was saying that this pizza maker was a good story to teach something about that problem and how to fix it for yourself. And she tells a story about this guy who's like a hobbyist pizza maker, and he loves making for his, weekend warrior chef. And then he starts selling his pizzas, and then he starts a business, and he, has a storefront, he has a restaurant and a food truck. And all of a sudden she makes this conclusion that she says he misses making pizza. And I was
Mm.
like, no, he didn't. He doesn't miss making pizza. He misses the feel of the flour, or he misses the
Ooh.
feeling of when he spins the dough. You know what he misses? It's for some reason when it lands again,
Mm.
right? It's like he's being embraced by this craft that he loves.
Right.
Okay, you have no idea what dough feels like, maybe. Maybe you don't care about pizza even, but you do have moments in your life where you're like, that little tiny thing that's just for me that I so
Yeah.
love, when it's just me and the thing I do. And now you're thinking of it. So to me, again, back to talking about a person, or back to like, this is about restraint. I could over explain everything about the flour or the dough. I could over explain everything about missing pizza, but that only works if I want you to really only think about this guy and his pizza. But I don't. I want you to be thinking about your own life. I think that's the best sign you've resonated is not somebody saying, I love that. It's somebody rushing up to you and saying, oh my gosh, Forrest, the whole time you and Jay were speaking, I kept thinking of this in my life.
Boom.
That's a
Yes.
sign you've deeply aligned and resonated. And it's
Right.
hard to do that if you don't have some sense of restraint. I'm getting so emotional talking about storytelling. No, I just had the flu. That's why I'm choking down tea. But if you don't have that sense of restraint of, I'm going to give you something so specific, but still somehow restrained and sparing, that now you're going to paint your own specifics. It's a bit of a paradox. It's like if you want to
Mm.
connect deeper externally, you have to turn deeper internally, find those one or two really specific details, and then back away and let the audience enroll themselves in filling out the rest.
Awesome. I want to get back to this idea of the signature story.
Sure.
Or, I've heard you also use the term original premise, right? Some idea that you can actually own, it's really
Yep.
yours. What is the process for like uncovering that, or like figuring out what is it and which one do I want to tell, and where is it appropriate? And
Yeah. I work with a woman. She's wonderful. Her name is Mary Knox Miller, and she wants to be the thought leader's thought leader. She works with academics mostly, and she wants to help them translate their ideas for the lay crowds, which is great. I want more people to do that too. Science communicators and whatever domain it is, not just science. You're steeped in academia, and you want to communicate better with the private sector or with audiences elsewhere to just educate. And she knows her audience wants to partner with organizations and be the go-to expert, not just to be a famous professor who has nice sound bites and builds an online audience, but actually get the call to join the boards or collaborate on the products and services or speak at events, those kinds of things. So it's very different, she said, between being known and being the go-to expert. And what she kept saying is she wants to help people communicate in a human first way, speak human first.
hmm,
Okay, what does that mean? Like, we all say stuff like this. We all make assertions about how we see it. Like, we sense our perspectives and then we attempt to give it pithy language. Actually, go back to where you're sensing it and give me the like 2-drink minimum version of that. Give me the rantiest of rants. Give me the total brutal honesty for what you see as broken and what you see as a potential solution without trying to put tight language to it yet. I want clay first. So I would say start with your frustrations for how you see something and really start to use that to get it out on the page. Then start to synthesize, start to turn frustration into curiosity. So Mary Knox would be like, why do they communicate that way? Oh, it seems like in academia, you're really just rewarded for almost like white labeling your ideas when you apply for a grant or try to get published in an industry journal. You're not, or scientific journal. You're not trying to do that based on your tone of voice or personal childhood stories you're telling. You're trying to do that based on the purity of your research and your ideas. So in the
mm,
academic world, they remove two things: trust and connection. And it's all about influence. It's all about the idea itself informing a decision,
right.
informing an action. Get published, get the grant, change how the work is done in your field. So can we get to the top of the pyramid right away? We're going to remove the idea of trust, because who you are doesn't matter. You work for Duke University, you have a PhD. Great. That's all we care about, right? You have the right to do the research and you did it. All right. Trust is taken care of for you. Not when you communicate with lay people. Okay, what about
Right.
connection? That's the next layer up on this pyramid. Well, connection is about not just what you say, but how you say it. Can I start with a story? Can I have a great tone of voice? Like, are you leaning in and engaging? You trust me, but do you reciprocate that trust with emotion? That's connection. Okay, great. That's taken care of for you in the academic world too. Everyone writes the same way. No tone of voice, no stories, no identifiers of you personally. So now all you're left with is allegedly the purity of the idea at the top. So now Mary Knox is going, I started with Jay going, I want to help people speak human first. I have no idea what I'm saying. I have no idea what that means. Let's get mad at the status quo for a while and then try to build up this like pyramid where we can say, what does human first means? It means adding back, as an academic, the bottom layer of trust and the second layer of connection so that you can achieve that top layer of influence on the purity of your ideas. Because in academia, you don't need the bottom two layers, but in the lay world, you do. That's what I mean when I say human first. Put those two bottom layers representing humanity first. Okay, that's a premise. It went from like a sensed idea or a pithy soundbite to something she can argue and defend. So to me, that's a really quick sum up of premise development, from frustration to curiosity and from curiosity to positioning.
I can totally see it. And speaking about that specific topic, human first, I mean, that's something that matters now in ways it never has before. I mean, sure, there's academia, but there's also this flood of AI generated content now, and everyone's
Yeah.
being pushed to adopt this and use more of it. And it has its uses, I'm sure, but in a world, in a world where, in a world where so much material is being produced by machines, and if you live in our world, you can very easily spot this stuff. It's
Yeah.
usually stands out in garish, pinks and purples. Actually, no, it stands out in dull grays, battleship
Yeah.
grays. Putting humanity back into the center of any story that you're telling, anything you're creating, is what makes it stand out now. It becomes the differentiator. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is from an
Yeah.
actual human. This, and I know it's from an actual human because it's telling me a story that no
Right.
machine could make up. Or if it did try to make it up, it would look totally flat and fake. So, is this now a differentiator? Is this now an edge? Being able to tell a story that can separate us from this
I think it's
world of crap.
yeah. Is it now? I think it's always been an
Yeah.
edge. I think now it's urgent that you make it
Mm.
your edge because yeah, if you there's a perfect example back to the idea of telling a story to connect. I live in Boston and I go to the New England Aquarium
Yeah.
with my kids a lot. And so the other day I took my daughter who's 6 and there's this tank at the very top of the aquarium, or really it runs throughout the whole of the building, up all these different floors. You can kind of walk this ramp around this giant ocean tank, and at the top it opens up. And there's something really inspiring about seeing open water in a building that has the rest of it behind glass, because it's almost like you're closer to the wildlife. But the staffers who are there to answer your questions, to me, are at risk, like a lot of content creators are at risk with AI, because they have a microphone and they're answering questions. But the difference between my daughter interacting with them or being at the top of that tank now at age 6 and me at age 6 going to that aquarium is now they have all these touch screens around the rim of the tank. So if the
Mhm.
staffers are busy, then you can just get your facts about the tank. This is a green turtle. They live this long. They weigh this much. They eat this food. You can get it from a kiosk.
Sure.
So I swear to you,
Yeah.
Forrest, those kiosks, they're bolted down, but they are definitely coming for those staffers' jobs because those staffers are doing things that don't uniquely require them. And
Mm.
if you're not doing things that don't uniquely require you, sooner or later, and it's looking like sooner, you might not be required. So what could they do? In addition to doling out the basic information and commodity facts about the green turtle, they could be like, that's Myrtle.
Yes.
She's 75 years old. She's
Mhm.
cranky as hell. Every time we add a new
Uh-huh.
fish, they wander up to Myrtle where she slumbers at the top of the tank and smack, they learn a valuable lesson. Get off my coral, right? What is Myrtle doing here? Is her family worried about her in the ocean, so they sent her here for safety in her retirement? Does she chain smoke Marlboro Greens? Is she just a little bit shrimpist? But hey, she grew up in a different era of the ocean. Like, what that staffer is not doing is making me care about the
Right.
commodity information that any bot or kiosk could have given me, right? So yes,
Yeah.
the bots can help me know, but the humans make me feel. And we really don't think that second part matters much in our work. And I'm here to tell you that that's actually the differentiator between someone you pick and someone you ignore to make a buying decision, to make friends, to wed your partner, whatever it is you're doing. There's just 3 tiny words that have the biggest impact on everything we do, which is make me care. And so if
Yes.
you know all the machinations of that, you might just well be AI proof, or not, if not AI proof, if you're eventually on par with AI, they're going to pick you because of who you are, not just what you can do.
And that example you gave was so perfect because your kid's not going to remember the map of the sea turtle habitat. They're not going to remember
No.
the average weight or age of sea turtle, but they're going to remember Myrtle, and
Yes.
they're going to be engaged with Myrtle, and they're going to want to come back and see Myrtle again, and they're going to
Right.
remember Myrtle and think about Myrtle's plight in the wild, and they're going to want want Myrtle to be
Amen.
okay.
Amen. And let's go to the meta level. Underpinning my answer was a reason I'm giving it that way. Like, by giving you the Myrtle story, which by the way is one of my signature stories, I I hope you remember me. I hope you go and subscribe to my newsletter or podcast. I hope you hire me. Like, I don't want to just show up in front of people and people go, that's nice, and then I'm never remembered. Like, I want, as we all do, some kind of deeper level of connection with everybody, with you, Forrest, with the people watching or listening. Like, this is across the board. It's not just me. And so that's like the difference between, are you just sharing some information and expertise? Or are you ensuring that you make that information and expertise come alive? And like back to the very literal alive example of that turtle, she really is named Myrtle. She really does have some personality traits on the website. So if you're the staffer, don't act like a kiosk, don't act like a touchscreen and give me yet more facts. Make sure those facts come to life. Because now not only do I care about this place, this brand, this moment in time, but I might just care about you.
Mm-hmm. All comes back to everything we've said right from the beginning about, resonance, not reach. About, what was the Ishiguro quote again?
Stories are like one person saying to another, this is how it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? So that's clarity. Does it also feel this way to you? So that's connection.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So, Jay, you mentioned the podcast, How Stories Happen. People can get
Yes.
more of this every week from you. And, understanding how, as you mentioned earlier, storytelling is this purposeful craft and how it can work.
Right.
If people are looking for you in other ways. So, How Stories Happen, that's available on all the usual podcast platforms. You've got a great newsletter. How can people sign up for that?
Yep, jayacunzo.com. You'll find the newsletter every Friday. I'm sending a framework, a story, some kind of idea you can grab, use, and apply to become a stronger speaker or storyteller. And I do all these longer form, both essays and video projects that are also available on my site. But it's all about that one premise of helping other people with substance and expertise resonate deeper in a world that's really obsessed with vanity reach.
Okay, jayacunzo.com. If you don't know how to spell it, please look down right there. It's right there. And if people want to hire you as a coach or get into one of your boot camps, same place?
Same place, yep.
All right, Jay, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed getting your insights into this, and it's got me fired up to beef up my own storytelling and try to find my own signature stories. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Folks, so there you go. Why Storytelling Matters, presented by app. That's mmhmm.app. Thank you so much for your time.